Thank you for tuning into the Realness Required Podcast. My name is Waldie.
And I'm Erikka.
Today's episode, we are going to talk about ego. Why are we talking about ego today?
Well, because I feel like you speak about ego a lot. And I guess I've never really thought of things as ego or me using my ego or not using my ego. So I thought that it would be good if we kind of explain that so that people recognize it. Because I think it's
going to come up.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
So it's best if we kind of define that or at least elaborate on.
And I think when people are using their ego, it's not a conscious thing most times. Sometimes it is. Because I do believe you know when it's your ego.
I would agree.
Yeah. So just maybe breaking that down and maybe talking about like when that shows up so that you can identify it, you can work on it, you can try to come from a place of not using your ego.
I think the easiest way to understand ego, it's that part of you that is afraid most of the time. And that could be afraid to tell somebody how you feel. It could be afraid to cross the street because you think you're going to get hit by a car. That's what I think ego is. Like ego, because the ego is all about self-preservation. The ego is all about survival. Where things get conflated is when your ego is taking the driver's seat in a scenario where you're not really at risk. You're not really in danger. There's really no reason to fear. Ego can also be that part of you that identifies with how you look or what kind of car you drive. Eckhart Tolle wrote A New Earth, among other books, but I believe it's him who defines ego as any identification with form. So that means identifying with your car, identifying with status, social status, identifying with how much money you make or how much money is in your bank account, identifying with, I would even say, go as far as to say like how you look, the color of your skin, what kind of hair you have, what kind of eye color you have, what country you're from, like all of that, the identification with it, the identification with those things is ego.
Oh, see, I always thought that ego, which this is probably ego too, but I always looked at it as, let's say you're a person and you think you're better than someone and you actually voice that. I feel like that's ego.
That is ego. Most people think that ego is that, oh, she thinks she's better than everybody else.
Yes, that's
that
what
attitude,
I've always thought.
That
yes.
you act like you're better than everyone else. When, again, it is that, but why are they acting like they're better than everyone else? It's because they're identifying with those things. They're thinking, I have more money than you. I have a better car than you. My children went to college, yours didn't. Whatever it is, So that attitude that you're thinking is ego, it is ego, but it's because they're trying to communicate to you like I have more than you or I am better than you. And the ego is identifying with form. It's identifying with the social status, who their friends are, what kind of possessions that they have, material possessions they have. That's usually what ego is going to do. It's going to identify with those things because the ego's conquest or the ego's obsession is regarding external power. The ego wants external power.
So meaning praise from others or something from gratification, something from another person.
That's right. The ego is so fragile because the ego oftentimes it is identifying with form and it's basing itself on the validation and opinions of others. That's what makes it so fragile. So let's say it's in vogue to have this kind of car. Okay, this person has that car. Let's say Joe has this car. Okay. Joe's getting all the praise, like, oh my gosh, Joe, we love your car. It's so awesome. Joe's ego is being fed. That's why he bought the car. He wanted the praise because he wanted external power. Where does he have power here? It's the praise from others that is making him feel validated. It's making him feel like he has power. As soon as that car is not in vogue anymore, he's lost his power. So that's why the conquest for external validation and external power, which the ego does, it's never absolute. It's always temporary. It's always fleeting because it's based on other people. It's not based on your inner truth. It's based on other people's opinion of said thing or said status or said, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So if you are a person that leads from your ego often, is that because you're lacking in other areas? Meaning like internally lacking. Would you say that?
If you're operating from ego often, you actually feel very insecure. And this constant conquest or this constant obsession or fixation, however you want to phrase it, this constant need for validation, external validation, is insatiable. It's insatiable because it changes. The goalpost changes continually. It's not definitive. It's not absolute. It's always changing. So when you think about it that way, someone who is operating from their ego is constantly going to chase that moving goalpost because they don't have an inner sense of self that self-validates or a spiritual practice that grounds and centers them with internal, authentic power. They're still basing their sense of self on how everyone else must quantify it. If being a success is having this car, living in this neighborhood, having this job, having a wife or a husband or spouse that looks like this, and I have all of those things, that's their goal. Those are people operating from their ego, checking off all the boxes to have all the external things that they're supposed to have. Once you get all of those things, you're actually not happy because your sense of worth is based on others' idea, not your own. So it doesn't feel satisfying or honest because it's not coming from you. It's based on other people. So as soon as other people, like I said, move that goalpost, oh, I got to get the new phone. I got to get the new car. Oh, I have to have a house that has this automation or has these solar panels or whatever it is.
And it's
it
ends up being a never-ending story.
That's right.
And it also ends up being something, obviously, that's not making you happy.
That's right.
Because you would just be happy with the first car you bought. It wouldn't be, oh, I have to get this new one to feel better or to get the gratification. So would you say then that a person would need to do the internal work?
I would say that. I would say that if someone is operating from their ego to that extent, and I'm sure we can think of people because, I'm sure people come to mind when we talk about someone like that, right? I wouldn't want you to get to the end of life and look at all the things that you have and realize that it meant nothing. So then we're asking the question, what is true wealth? What is success? We have to redefine success. If we've defined success based on external sets of criteria and checklists that are based in the physical or external, like I said, car, house, job, social status, etc., how big your wedding ring is, whatever. If we've based it on that, now we have to start basing it on more honest, internal, authentic measures that have us at the center of it, where we are self-validating. It may take a spiritual practice to help you get there. It can't hurt. Everyone on this planet, if you have life, you have meaning and you have purpose. You don't need a specific job to have worth or value. You inherently have value because you are here.
You exist. Yeah.
Because you exist. That's an absolute truth. And when you know that, you don't question it. And you don't act in a way that feels like you have to grasp for it by having this thing or that thing, because you know it already. It's not to say like we can't have nice things, but there's a difference between knowing who you are and saying, yeah, I want to treat myself, where it's just because you authentically want it, and getting praise from other people because you have offloaded your sense of worth on others and you haven't been able to do it yourself. So that's what I mean. Like when you're operating from your ego to that extent excessively, it speaks to your insecurity. Like I would say it's like an inner voice that's saying, I'm not good enough.
Okay.
I'm not good enough. And maybe if I have all the things, I'll be good enough.
Because that's where the external piece comes from, because they're looking for the validation from someone else. Mm-hmm. So they're thinking, if I have the nice car or the cute girlfriend or boyfriend
or if
whatever,
I have all X amount of followers or likes,
mm-hmm.
or then I'll be worth something. When it's like, you're buying into a lie. You're already worth something because you exist.
And you already have meaning. Yeah.
Yes.
You already have meaning. So what do you say then will help someone to identify with when they're using their ego or coming from a place of ego. Because again, when I say it's not conscious, sometimes you don't know. So how do you...
When you feel like you're owed something. If you feel like you are owed anything, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel like you are owed something, that is your ego. You are not owed anything. And it's that sense of entitlement. That is ego.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that I had an issue with for a very long time. And I didn't realize that until recently, maybe within like the last year, that part of myself was ego. Because again, I told you that I was looking at it from a place like, oh, I'm better than you. And I knew that if you drive the nicest car, or if you hang around a certain type of friend group for status or whatever, I already knew that was ego. But I never thought of, if you feel like you're owed something, whether it's respect. Because I told you I used to come from a place where if someone did something to me, I would think in my head, like, how dare they even think about crossing me in that way?
Yes.
Why would they even think it? I guess that's how much I felt like I was worth or owed or whatever. Because I would think back to, I've done this for you, I've done that for you, I've been there for you, I've never crossed you. So when it happens to me, I'm thinking, how dare you even do it? And that is where a lot of that resentment was, that I needed to work on, because I couldn't even understand how someone could cross me in a way. Someone that I was close to. I just couldn't get past it. And I thought that in no way that you should have done me that way. And you should have known better. But when I think back to, well, Erikka, who are you? Like, you're not queen. You're not ruler over everybody. You know, you can get hurt just like everybody else. You are no different from anyone else. You're not better than anyone else. You're not special. You're not exempt from pain. You're not exempt from hurt.
And you're not at the center of everyone's world. So you're taking it as if she did something to you.
Or he.
And she could have been involved in a situation, and her actions were just an after effect or a side effect. And that impacted you. But she was dealing with something else. So, you know, it's like, you slighted me. You did that to me, when it's like, no, actually I was focused on this. And yeah, that ended up happening. It's not like I'm literally stabbing you. It's like, no, I was worried about this thing, and that just ended up happening.
Well, it wasn't so much. Sometimes I was thinking of it as intentional, but it wasn't like I was thinking of it as it was an intentional thing. It was just, I guess I was coming from...
Like, I deserve better?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm a good person.
Or
How dare
I was
you do
thinking
that?
I would never do that to you.
Right.
So if it would never cross my mind to do that to you, how could it even cross your mind to do that to me?
Another way is like, I'm the smartest person in the room. That's ego. Like, I'm smarter than everyone, and you're dumb. And when your ego comes out, when you're judging someone as like stupid, I've been on the receiving end of that behavior. Yeah. So like, that's your ego thinking you're the smartest person in the room. Are you the king? Are you the queen?
Yeah.
Who made you king or queen? I didn't.
And that's why I wanted to talk about this, because again, some people may be looking at ego as something totally different, or maybe looking at one area as where they feel like ego shows up, when it shows up whether you mean it to or not.
And it does. And ego also has different expressions, and that's why it's good we're talking about it. When you think ego, like, it can seem kind of like boisterous, kind of like a strong
in your face.
Yeah, in your face, right? Like, that's what you perceive. That's the connotation that comes to mind. When it can also be when somebody identifies with being a victim. When there are people who identify with being a victim, where it's like, woe is me. That is ego. Their ego is identifying with that identity of being a victim. And it makes them feel safe. That's what the ego does. The ego is doing it for survival, is doing it for self-preservation.
Or protection.
Or for protection. It might not be necessary. A lot of the time it isn't necessary. You're acting like, woe is me. Or I'll give you another example. People who identify with their disease. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a cancer survivor. You can have an experience, but not identify with it. We've seen the people that identify with it and make that their identity, and the people that don't. Making it your identity is ego.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
Because it gives you, it makes you feel Like you have external power. And what comes to mind? You get attention. Maybe people feel sorry
Sympathy.
for you.
Yeah.
Sympathy. And that gives you power. Why does it give you power? Because you're still looking at power as external, like it doesn't come from within you. It still comes from outside of you. That is incorrect. Unless you're on a quest for external power, then by all means, go have external power. But you're going to be on that hamster wheel your entire life. When you have authentic power, that is absolute. It's, I know I am worthy. I know I am enough. I give myself grace. The end.
Because there's plenty of people that have had things go on in their life and you never hear about it. They never even bring it up. And if something comes up and let's say you're going through that same thing and then they say, oh, well, I dealt with that 3 years ago. That would be the appropriate time to bring it up if you can help someone in their journey.
Right.
But to lead with that, oh, I'm a cancer survivor.
Well,
or, I went through this.
Read that.
Yeah.
Energetically, we can read that. Our intuition is like, oh, they want sympathy. Like, oh, they're using that as their way to manipulate. And if you're dumb enough to actually hand over your power to somebody who's trying to do that with you, play that game with you, you're just as bad. You don't know yourself just as much. That if you're willing to give over your sympathy to someone like that, then you are not grounded and centered in your own authentic power if you so easily give it away. If they have reeled you into that, you are two sides of the same coin here. You're participating in that dynamic. You're just as bad as the person who's playing the victim.
Yeah.
They're playing the victim to siphon energy from you, like an energy vampire.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from then? The need to lead with your ego, that has to come from somewhere. Is it childhood? Is it something that happened to you? Is it, where does that come from?
Again, it goes back to self-worth. The issue of self-worth is at the core of this. You do not think you are worthy. You do not think you are good enough. And you think you need to wear these labels, identify with these things, have these things to feel worthy. And it's like maybe you didn't grow up and somebody made you feel like you are enough. Maybe your parents didn't make you feel like you were good enough or that you deserved love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe you felt like you had to earn love. And maybe the dynamic was, you got to do this. You got to get straight A's if I'm going to like love on you or show you affection. Or
That's
show
when
you
they
love.
showed you the affection, when you got straight
When you
A's.
did the external thing, then I'm going to be loving. When it's like, no, I love you because you are you. You exist as you. You exist. That's why I love you, And when you know that your worth is not dependent upon these fluctuating external circumstances, it gives you confidence to be who you are out into the world. When you aren't given that, or you don't know that, you're still negotiating who you are. You're still looking for that. Am I worthy of love? Maybe I'll be worthy of love if I have enough things, or if I have enough titles, or if I have enough degrees, or if I have, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think you're going to be constantly caught in that until you resolve the self-worth piece or self-love. I think that's still being questioned if your ego is still at the helm or in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Then I guess, what would you say to people that are leading with their ego? Now that they're watching this, they kind of know the signs, they know what that is. How do you stop that? Like, is it right when you feel it you feel a need to get some external validation? Does it start there?
I mean, I think it starts with pausing and paying attention to when that part of you is being activated, where it's like, oh, I want to impress, or I want to, or that voice where you're saying like, the how dare they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's all of that.
I very much thought that.
It's humbling yourself.
Yeah.
It's humbling yourself. Mm-hmm. It's realizing that it doesn't matter externally. It doesn't matter what people have. What matters is their essence.
Yeah.
Their essence is what matters. Not what kind of hair they have, what kind of clothes they wear, how much money they have. And when you start to humble yourself in that way, and I also, before I move on, I want to point out that you can tell when the ego is being activated and identifying with things when you also are placing labels on people. Because if you place labels on you, you're placing labels on them. So if you're like, I'm good enough,
Okay.
you're also, if you're playing that game, you're saying other people aren't good enough. If you're saying I'm good enough because I have this stuff, or I'm successful because I have this stuff, you are participating in a game that, you're pointing out who isn't. If you can point out that you are good enough because you have this car, this house, this whatever, you're also saying who's not. And it's because it's like that's how you're inflating your ego to make you feel better.
So if someone pulls up beside me with a 1989 beat up Honda, and I think, oh my goodness, they must be broke. That's ego, because I'm thinking, that
they wouldn't
I'm
choose
better
to have that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That I'm better than that because I'm riding in a newer car.
I did something with my life.
Yeah.
They
I
didn't
see
do
what
crap with their life.
Okay. Yeah.
When it's like, how do you define a life?
Yeah.
A life lived.
And they can
or
have
a
more money
person.
than you do. They just
absolutely
don't
could.
spend their money on an expensive car.
But again, it goes back to the quality of the person. Yeah. The person's essence is where the value is, not anything exterior.
So then would you say then that it's easy to not be in your ego? Because I feel like that's not an easy thing. I feel like people are in their ego every day. I could be wrong.
I mean, I think it's easy for me, but I feel like I've known about it for so long that I've been able to address it so long ago. Like, it's been over 10 years since I understood the concept of ego. Like, I've been, I feel like I'm past being a beginner at this point. I'm like an expert at dealing with my ego.
Yeah. Well, you've helped
still
me.
comes up.
You've helped me with that a great deal, actually. And Carol and Miss also, because remember I told you that I would make comments in my mind if I would walk past a couple. And this is because I wasn't in a relationship and I hadn't been in a while. I would walk past a couple and the girl she
look busted.
Yeah, well, she didn't. You can just tell she didn't try. She just kind of got up and walked out of the house or whatever. And I would say, now, if she can get a man, I can get a man. Like, why do I not have a man if she got a man? But I had to really understand that putting that out there is really like a hindrance on me. I'm automatically labeling that as is something wrong with that. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So she could be the most beautiful thing to that man, or they can not be in the best relationship. And I don't want that. I don't know if it was an envy thing or if it was because I wasn't coming from a place like I'm better than you. I didn't think that I was. I was just looking at it like, why is it so hard for me to find a man and she walking around here with one? That's how I was looking at it. So I don't know. I know that was ego, but I don't know where that was pulled from.
I mean, I think it goes back to what we said about being good enough, having self-worth. Your measure for self-worth might be doing your hair a certain way, dressing a certain way, and that's how you know you have self-worth. Where she might have all the self-worth in the world and not limit herself in the same way.
That's why she was confident in just coming out the house how she wanted to come out
That's right.
the house.
Because she doesn't, how I feel about me has nothing to do with y'all, which again goes back to she might have more authentic power in that sense. Like she's not looking for others to validate her. I don't know her. I could be completely off base. There could be another reason there. But I think that projection speaks to how you limit yourself.
Yeah, it did. It must have.
Because it speaks to how you quantify your worth.
Yeah. So I had to be conscious of that. And the more conscious you are of it, you can change it. When I would even begin to think it, I would automatically change my, train of thought. And I would not say those words in my mind. And I've been actively doing that. And now it doesn't even come up.
Yeah.
It doesn't even happen anymore.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it anymore. It just doesn't even come up. And I'm like, wow, it's just that easy to just stop doing it. And eventually it doesn't even register in your brain when you're walking past couples or people, or it just doesn't anymore.
And it's funny that as you're talking, the thing that came to mind is if you're living from your ego to that extent where you are focused on the external, it's like you are a book. You think the cover of your book is going to be judged. So like you're focused on having that all be all well and good, right? But I think when you lean into ego too much to where that is in the driver's seat, it's like opening a book and there's no substance. Because if you are focused on other people validating your sense of self, you can't know who you are. You cannot know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, then you can't be in alignment or connected. You're still waiting on that person to validate you. It doesn't work that way. I feel that you don't know thyself if you've chased that validation your whole life. Or if you've been chasing that, you don't know you. And you got to get to know you because you got to live with you. Because again, it doesn't matter how many things and how many people you impress at the end of your life, no one will care.
So where do you start? Do you start with, if you want to start operating from a place that's not your ego, where do you start? Do you start with, okay, let's stop worrying about the things that give you gratification, external gratification. Let's start there. Or do you start with the internal stuff first? Or do you kind of...
I mean, I think where you started is pretty good. Like, catch yourself when you feel that ego, that voice come up. Because that you are not your ego. Just so we're clear, like your ego is the inner roommate that like lives inside your head. It's not you. So stop identifying with that voice as you. You actually have a lot of control over that voice. It's just like you said, that the thought comes up from my ego. I know it's coming from my ego and I just shut it out. It's like living with a roommate in your brain and they're annoying and they say shit that's nonsense. And you just like, girl, go to your room. Like, and you put them away into their room.
Yeah.
Because you know better. You know that's not the truth. So you don't allow it to have a voice that overrides the whole system. So I feel like that's the start. It's catching yourself when you're judging someone, when you're judging the book by its cover, when you're holding yourself to those standards and not being kind to yourself because you haven't met these external standards that, where did you inherit those from? Like you inherited those from someone. Those didn't come from you. Someone told you that was what makes you worthy of anything, worthy of love, worthy of anything.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? You got to ask yourself, you got to challenge these beliefs. It's not inherent to who you are. That is not you. It's not you. Your essence doesn't identify with these things. The essence of you, your true self, your inner self, your soul self, authentic self, doesn't care about any of that. Someone told you that that's what mattered. That's the hamster wheel you've been on. So start unraveling where those ideas came from in the first place, because it's not true. Once you realize that those are false, you stop holding yourself to those standards and you start exploring new paths to authentic power. But you have to make that opening by removing those tendencies and those behaviors like you did.
Yeah.
Challenging those tendencies and behaviors.
So if you have the nice car, when you pay it off, just keep the car.
Yeah.
Don't get another one.
Yeah.
Don't get the new iPhone. Just keep the one you have or whatever. And then just try that along with when it's showing up for you. Just think about something else. Move on to something else. We're not going to entertain that anymore. We're not going to entertain that voice anymore when it comes up.
Yeah.
We're just going to move on. And eventually that voice is going to go away.
Yeah. I think that you will end up making space for real connection to come in. And it'll just come in. However that looks. Maybe you meet someone who brings that into your life and helps you work on that. Maybe you get involved with something that brings about real connection. When you start to challenge those things and stop allowing your ego to drive, naturally your ego will start to recede and something else will take the driver's seat. And you don't even have to worry about that part, because your true self, your spiritual self, your inner self, whatever you want to call it, your authentic self, which I believe, I'll just say your soul, that will start taking the driver's seat when your ego starts to receive and sit in the back seat. And you can consciously challenge your ego and say, girl, get out of here with that mess. The way that you talk to yourself. How do you talk to yourself in your own head? Are you super critical of yourself? Are you unkind to yourself? That's because you have these expectations of yourself that someone put there. And your ego is identifying with those things. And it's not true. You have to challenge yourself and say, that's not true. Go sit down. And eventually, like you already said, you stop thinking that way.
You do.
And then naturally what will happen is your true self will start to drive because you're challenging that voice, that inner roommate, that ego voice that always has something to say.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely say thank you because it definitely helped me. It helped me to identify with some stuff that it just didn't even cross my mind that it was ego. I'm just thinking I'm just saying something to myself, and it just didn't even cross my mind that it was ego. So I definitely thought this was very important to talk about because just like I didn't identify it, some other people out there are not going to identify that it's ego. That is that voice that makes you put someone down or, think you're better than someone else or whatever the case may be.
I don't remember if you know the story of Beauty and the Beast, but at the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, when there's like a beggar woman who comes to the castle of the prince's castle, and the prince turns her away because she looks like, in his mind, she looks like hideous and like dirty or what have you. So he's like, oh, get out of here. And she's looking for a place to stay, looking for something to eat. And he turns her away. Then she turns into this enchantress, beautiful enchantress, and says, and basically that's like a test, and I curse you. She put a curse on him and turned him into a beast. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to find true love in order to change back. But anyway, the point being that, it's the judging the book by the cover. It's it's that kind of judgment towards
He looked at
someone.
her as less of a person
Yes.
because of how she looked.
Yes.
Yeah.
When everyone has worth. Like everyone's been through something. After discovering Carolyn Miss, I think anyone could be an angel in disguise. And I mean, that gets me emotional. So like treat people like, and view people, not even just treat people. Cause I almost feel like if you treat people a certain way, you might do it expecting something in return, but view people as we're all the same. Yeah. We're all the same. We all are God's children. Yeah. We all are drops of the same ocean. Yeah. We're made of the same material here. And you just don't know, like, if someone actually like is an angel in disguise. I almost feel like by judging people, you're blocking blessings and miracles that could happen between you and a person. That doesn't need to happen because you're judging them. And your reason you're judging them is because you judge you so harshly. Let yourself off the hook. Yeah. Someone told you a lie so long ago, and you're still trying to be good enough because you don't know that you were the whole time. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's good.
So that's ego.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like I could talk more about ego, but I'm sure it'll come up in more conversations.
Oh yeah.
So thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or want our advice on a situation you may have, you can reach us at advice@realnessrequired.com. Send in your story. We'll give you our advice. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this with anyone you think it would help. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.